If you're a pastor, uh, and you think that their sermons are what you need to feed your spirit with before Sunday, I would call you to question that, big time, big time. Here, let's take a look at the catalog of the recent sermon list. The coming of world peace, the beginning of the end, God's great day of wrath. That's sort of interesting sounding. Work of the Word, A Vision of the Lamb, A Vision of the Lamb Part 2, A Vision of the Lamb Part 3, Hearers and Doers. Okay, hearers and doers. Okay, that that was 2 out of 8. I would probably find myself to be slightly interested in knowing that this non-charismatic man who never felt the Holy Spirit in his entire life might actually have something good to offer. Now, when I look at catalog, which recently came out, let's look at the titles here. The Spirit of 2 Timothy, Glory that Satisfies the Soul, Why Satan Persists, Rescued from the Lion for Heaven, Fruit Only the Spirit Can Grow, What False Teaching Should Make Me Leave the Church, How the Spirit Breaks the Power of the Flesh, It Is Still Well with My Soul. Well, what false teaching should make me leave a church is the only one that jumped out at me. Now, I can understand how some people might react at other points. And one Christian metal artist one time said that, well, some people like different styles for other reasons that we cannot explain. Some people like this style, some people like that. But here's what I don't see. I don't see a consistent theme of preaching against sin in any of these sermon titles. Do you? Let's go over that again. Okay, let's go back to, and we're going to go over these sermon titles. And keep this in mind. These are sermon titles that are based off of 1 hour long messages. 1 hour long messages that are not about preaching against sin. They're not about preaching against sin. The coming of world peace, not about preaching against sin. The beginning of the end, not about preaching against sin. God's great day of wrath, that might have something in it because it's about God's judgment against sin. So I'll reserve some for that. Work of the Word, probably not about preaching against sin. Vision of the Lamb, Vision of the Lamb, Vision of the Lamb, probably not about preaching against sin. Hearers and doers, that might have to do something with preaching against sin. So that's why I said earlier, the hearers and doers sermon and God's great day of wrath sermon from the latest things from could have some preaching against sin. But here's the thing, it's not going to have emotional passion. It's not going to have pulpit pounding conviction. And that's dangerous. That's dangerous. Spirit of 2 Timothy, not about preaching against, this is the catalog, past 8 sermons. Spirit of 2 Timothy, that's not about preaching against sin. Glory that satisfies the soul, not about preaching against sin. Why Satan persists, not about preaching against sin. Rescued from the lion for heaven, not about preaching against sin. Fruit only the Spirit can grow, that's not about preaching against sin. What false teachings should make me leave a church? That probably is about preaching against sin, right? The sins of false teachings. How the Spirit breaks the power of the flesh. That's probably about preaching against sin. So it's 2 out of 8 with both of them, where there's probably, even just in the title alone, you have some preaching against sin there. So in that sense, these guys are solid biblical theologians, and that's valid, and they're very, very popular men, and that's valid as well. But the thing that has always alarmed me is the emotional lukewarmness compared to Leonard Ravenhill, David Wilkerson, and Paul Washer. And I hate to say that, Paul, since you're still alive, because I don't want to lionize you while you haven't passed into glory yet. But I'm just saying, when guys, there's 2 approaches to this thing. One group of preachers is baptized in the Holy Spirit, and they can see as clear as day that the Bible is to be used to preach against sin, to urgently warn sinners to flee from the wrath to come. And then there's this other class of preachers, they're so academic, it's only occasionally that it occurs to them, man, I should really preach against some sins today. And that is so lukewarm. Are you talking about picking and choosing? Yes, I am. Yes, I am talking about picking and choosing. Because our time is limited and our impact should be used to the maximum extent, to the full extent of the law, if we want to say it that way. We're not going to be able to, if we don't break up the fallow ground, if we're just sitting there talking about spirit of 2 Timothy, oh, the Lord be with your spirit, grace be with you all, and I'm going to tell you who Priscilla was, and who Aquila was, and who Onesiphorus was, and here's a whole bunch of historical background of the Bible. Nobody's going to get convicted over sin hearing an hour-long message on stuff like that. This stuff is silly. I agree with this one guy. He put out this message. I forget his name. He's really connected with TPUSA. He said, we're not just called to be historians, you know. A pastor's not supposed to be just a historian. If you don't preach against it, if you don't engage political culture and confront national sin with enough fervency that it actually starts to make an impact, you're just a historian. You're just teaching the history of Israel or first century Rome and blah, 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 blah. There's no spiritual impact. There's a lukewarmness with it. Brothers, we are not professionals. Why do we have to say that? Why do we even have to say that? Are you using your education in the right direction? Or are you meandering and wandering down all these little trails? You're not guiding people properly because you've lost your spiritual vision. There's a guy in Chicago, I won't name his name. He proudly declared in a huge podcast, I've been in the ministry for 30 plus years, and I think I've only preached like 2 or 3 sermons on hell. Like, he was proud of that. Like, that was something to be proud about. You know, it's something to be ashamed about.